Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Midwest F1 League. Tonight we're in Division 3 for the third round of this season, taking place at the circuit Spa-Francorchamps. I will say this. I apologize. I'm going to... I'll say this. I botched the French pronunciation so much, so I apologize in advance if I get that wrong. We're at Circuit Spa-Francorchamps tonight for the third round of this 13th Midwest F1 season. Tonight we're in Division 3. It's been a little while since I've been in this division, I'll be fair with you, but it should be a very fun race nonetheless. We've only got 12 guys on the grid tonight, which is very unfortunate, and that is seeming to be the direction that league races go in nowadays, so I'll say this outright. I'm not sure if tonight's going to be a full replay of the Grand Prix. It might turn down to be a highlight reel. It may just be, a condensed replay. If the action's good enough, we'll have to wait and see. But what we do see is this. It's raining, and it's raining pretty good for the time being. It's not full wet condition yet. Intermediates only for the time being, but that should still be something to keep an eye on. I'll get my track map here in a second. While we have a moment, let's go through our driver and constructor standings here so far. Through the two rounds that we have had, it's Deathstorm 69.90 on top of the table at 49 points. Marky Mark in second at 41. Funky Breezy tied with Camp Morg in third at 38 points. Fireball 34 points. A Spaceman at 28. Peter DRH telling me now, wet quali and wet start to the race. It's going to be a fun one, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned. Spaceman, 28 points. Fuse Rogue, 22 points. Peter DRH, 17. Ill Bill Moose and Brett Drives Fast, all at 16 points. J-Dog at 14. Dead Text Message, 11. Red 92 Mask at 2. And Flipbox at 2 as well. As far as the constructors are concerned, we've got Red Bull atop the table at 66 points, as we got our Ferrari of Fireball out on track first. 66 points for the Red Bull team, 41 for... Oh, that's a big slide. Does he catch it? Yeah, he did. Wow, okay. So he's immediately tried to go for it up the hill going through Al Rouge and Radion, and somehow he's actually kept the car together. That one was wildly close then to being an accident already. I do believe we're getting very close to the point of where full wet tires could be in play. This track, treacherous in the dry, never mind the wet and the greasy. So, maybe the full wets will be slower, but they'll be safer. That's potentially a decision that they'll have to make. As I was saying, Williams and the Alpine tied at 41 apiece. Aston Martin at 38. Haas 35. Ferrari 34. Saubers at 33. Mercedes 24. And, of course, the McLarens and the V-Carbs tied at 16 apiece. And just so we have a good look at the schedule coming up here, we head to the Portimao circuit next time out. August 1st for the fourth round of the season. Then we head to the Albert Park circuit in Melbourne, Australia for round 5. Round 6 for the Red Bull Ring. Round 7 for the Netherlands. Round 8 for Monza. Round 9 is Miami. 10 is Azerbaijan. 12th is Singapore. 13th Brazil. 14th Canada. We don't actually have 15 rounds, do we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so I've miscounted somewhere along the line. That's okay. It's been quite a while since I've taken any sort of math class. I'm 22 years old, and the last time I took a math class was sophomore year in high school. So guess what? I don't know what I'm talking about. And if it has to do with numbers, I probably don't know. But what I do know is this. I do know motor racing, and I do see that Fireball making his way into the final chicane coming up right now. Let's go ahead and see how this first attempt on the intermediate tires will see here. This is going to be one hell of an attempt here into La Source. This 135-degree right-handed corner on the way in. Now, what's interesting about this corner nowadays, they've actually replaced all of the runoff area on the outside. It's all gravel now. If you get stuck in that, you're toasted. That's just the bottom line. Down the Support Series pit straight, and up the hill through Al Rouge and Radion. This one might be fun here. It's a bit of a downshift now that we're in the greasy conditions, but he's handled it much better than his outlap, I'll say that much. Heading down the Kemmel Straight now in towards Lacombe and the tail end of Sector 1. Top speeds will be found here, absolutely. Into Lacombe now. Got to be careful, especially if you're going side by side through here. It's not a very wide portion of the circuit. Exiting, this is Malmedy corner now, and down the hill towards Brussels. If you ask me, this is one of the more difficult corners on this track. It's kind of breaks away from you on the outside like that. There's a couple of lines of racing if you can get it right, but that's only if you get it right. Through Speaker's Corner now, or the No Name Corner as it was formerly called, and down the hill towards the double left at Puhan. This also very difficult to corner. Track dropping away from you. As you can tell, he's had to lift and brake quite heavily then in order to stay within track limits. making his way now in towards the corners of Campus and Stavolo coming up next. This is where George Russell and Antonio Giovinazzi had their massive crashes in 2020. Exiting Stavolo now. This corner has been fixed. That's all I can say about it. There used to be a very oddly placed barrier on the outside of that corner and not a lot of runoff. If you hit the runoff wrong, the sausage and exit curve, you would hit that barrier full steam. Going through Blanchimont corner now. He has gone wide. The time will keep going for him here as he goes into the final chicane here at the end of the lap. The question is he going to be able to put the power down and actually get away to a halfway decent time here at the end of it? You can see how tentative he is. Across the line, it's a 1:58.214. I'm assuming we're going to see better than that. My first guess is going to be Fuse Rogue. Across the line here, what does he have? And it will be 1:54.705. 3.5 seconds quicker, as you can tell. We've got Funky Breezy coming up the hill now in towards the chicane for our next driver on a timed attempt here. Still 2 drivers have yet to find the track. It's J-Dog and Moose. Back on the throttle is Funky Breezy, and across the line, going to be second, 1:56.792. Next up, we got a train of drivers here. We got Brett Drives Fast coming up next, is followed by the V-Carb of Flipbox. Oh, really squirrely getting on throttle then. He's gone second, 1:55.547. He's actually done quite well. He's gotten within 8.5 tenths of the top spot. Next round the line was that of Deathstorm to second. Not a bad lap from him at all. The V-Carb of Flipbox must be starting one now. No, he must have invalidated this and next. That's absolutely what's happened to him. That's unfortunate. We've had the Red Bull of Spaceman starting one now. Let's go along with Spaceman here. Very tentative going into the first corner, as you'd kind of expect. Very treacherous conditions here. We'll have the Aston Martin of Cat Morg and Tin Man the Rowdy coming up through Blanchimont here shortly to start one in just a minute. Spaceman very tentative up the hill. He saw yellow flags ahead of him, and I think it was for that V-Carb ahead of Flipbox. Something's happened with him. Spaceman, I think, doing kind of the right thing. He either made a bit of a mistake there or was kind of letting off. Because top the hill, it's after all, it is a blind corner, so you're not really going to have the ability to take evasive action if you don't take the moment to slow down on your way up through Eau Rouge and Radion. It's a tough corner to get right even in the dry, and in the wet, not helpful and very prone to accidents, I'm sure. Tin Man the Rowdy going through La Source now. He's got the Aston Martin of Cat Morg in front of him. Next across the line, looks like it's going to be the Mercedes of Fuse Rogue. Is he putting together a better lap? No, he has invalidated, but it appears he's going to be starting another one now. We've got Fireball on his way in to the final stretches of the lap here. He's going to be into the pit lane. No improvement from him. Deathstorm's actually gone purple sector 2 for the time being. We'll check back with him in a minute. For the time being, we've got Tin Man the Rowdy, and we've got Cat Morg making their way through Lacombe now, and in through Malmedy. Coming across the line, we do have the Red Bull of Funky Breezy. Across the line, he's slower by 5.5 seconds. Brett Drives Fast next up behind him, and Brett goes top of the table, 1:54.692, gets Fuse Rogue by 13 one-thousandths of a second. Behind him, Deathstorm, 1:54.439, gets a quarter of a second past Brett Drives Fast, and we've got about 10 minutes remaining in the session here with a couple of more drivers coming around the line now. Flipbox up next. Of course, he has invalidated this end next. He may find his way into the pit lane. No, it appears he's going to try to go for one here. Behind him, the Red Bull of Spaceman, I think, might be starting another one right here. To the line he goes. P6 for him at the moment. Oh, it looks like we're going to get Will Anns in this race. Give me just a moment here. So apologies, I've had to get away there just for a minute. We've got Will Anns going to be joining the session now. According to Peter DRH, starts at 80%, drops to 15% towards the back end of the race. According to that, have sent Will Anns the invites now. Should be on his way here shortly, hopefully. Spaceman making his way around the lap here, although he has invalidated. Next up, we do have, I believe, the McLaren of Brett Drives Fast. Into the pit lane he goes. Oh, he's hit a bit of the wall there on the entry to the pit lane. Funky Breezy following him in behind. We've got the Lone Alpine of Deathstorm making his way into the final chicane now. I don't believe this is an improvement from him. Nope, into the pit lane as well. We've got the V-Carb coming up next of Flipbox, who has invalidated his attempt. We've got the Red Bull of Spaceman, a trip to the gravel outside of Stavelo. Next up, we've got the Ferrari of Fireball, but also Tin Man the Rowdy. And I think Tin Man, I don't suppose he's on a flyer at the moment. We'll have to wait and see what it says at the timing line here for Sector 2. 8 minutes remain in the session. Well, he is actually quicker by a second and a half. Okay, this might be a fair lap here from Tin Man. Well, I'm curious now. Makes his way through Blanchimont very easily then. Tell you what, looking a good lap from Tin Man here. Hopefully, he'll be able to get himself closer to pole. Currently off by over a second and a half. Very patriotic number that of 1776. But across the line goes Tin Man. And second place, 154.575, improves by over a second and a half. Great lap from the Ferrari in question. We've got one of the Saubers coming across the line now. It is Peter DRH, and across the line he goes up to 6th, 157.660, improves by 0.6 of a second. Next up is the Ferrari of Fireball, who has yet to put together, I think, a representative attempt. 7 minutes and 10 seconds remaining in the session now. Into La Source goes the Ferrari. Exits the corner, takes a lot of curb on the way out. A little surprised to see that much curb being taken, especially in the wet conditions like this. Usually you'll only really see... Oh, that's a big slide. Well, he's kept it quite well, has to be said. I thought he was going to be going around there. As it turns out, he's kept it together well. Down the Kemmel Straight now for Fireball. Will this be an improvement? And, yep, he'll be quicker by about 0.2 of a second. Good lap so far. But it has to be said, that's relatively the easy portion of the lap, is that first sector. Well, that's not true. I think I would argue Sector 3 easier. But this second sector here, so difficult if you don't get it right. Even if you do get it right, it will toss you around and spit you out on the other side if you even make one slip-up. For the time being, Fireball looks pretty good. But he's going through Puhan now. Let's see. 2 downshifts into 6th gear. It definitely appears that he's taken that better than the previous time we saw him go through the corner. Yeah, I think this is going to be an okay lap here. It's not going to be worthy of pole, not by any means, unless he's, improved by that much. Through Campus now, heading towards Stavelo. Over a second and a half quicker through this lap attempt. Tell you what, looking quite good here from Fireball. If he could just get through Blanchimont and then the chicane correctly, he'll be all right. Into the corner he goes. Oh, I tell you what, this is looking good. If he could just get the power down easy enough, he'll have a fair look at the top 5 here. Fireball to the line, does go 5th, 155.613, improved by 2.5 seconds. As you can tell, these drivers now finding their rhythm with the track. We've got the top 4 cars actually within 2.5 of a second of each other. Fireball a little bit further behind. We've got Funky Breezy, we've got Peter, we got Catmorg, we've got Flipbox as well. Flipbox actually making his way on a timed lap now. 2.5 quicker through Sector 1. Coming through to the final 5 minutes of the session here. Still 2 drivers have yet to put together a time. J-Dog is one of them. He's just gone wide, exiting La Source. Flipbox now is actually allowed... it was the Mercedes ahead of him. Oh, big slide into the wall. And he's lost a bit of the front wing there. And Spaceman disqualified from the session for blocking the pit lane. Has he just crashed into the wall there? Getting on the throttle, trying to exit the pit lane. That could very well be the case. But he will start from the back of the grid. That is a very odd turn of events there. Yeah, I don't really know. That's odd. Moose still yet to put together a time lap. I'm thinking potentially at this point, does he almost have a qualifying ban to be served? That's why we're not seeing him out on track. I'm thinking, well, not the case for J-Dog. J-Dog has been on track, is at the moment. Fireball making his way into Lefong now. Oh, that's absolutely botched. Lefong. It's spelled L-E-S space F-A-G-N-E-S. How do you pronounce that correctly? Lefong? I don't get it. I don't get it. With how close I am to Canada, you'd think I'd actually know how to speak a little bit of French. Not true. Fireball making his way through Blanchimont now. making his way towards the final chicane. This is not going to be a representative attempt from him. He's slower already. Peter DRH has actually improved by 0.7 of a second there. Stays in that 6th spot, but it's getting competitive. 3 minutes 15 remain now. We've got the V-carb of J-Dog rounding the final couple of corners. He's at the 150 entering the chicane now. This is not really going to be a representative lap from him unless does he have the ability to start a new one now. That could very well be the case. Assuming he's got enough fuel, he could definitely do that. Currently 9th at the moment. Heading into the first corner. Oh, that's a big slide. Huge tank slapper on the rear end then, and it nearly goes round from him. Deathstorm, 153.526. Massive lap from the Alpine then. Has put a second back to Tin Man the Rowdy. 2 minutes and 40 seconds remaining. Brett drives fast on a new timed lap. Fresh set of intermediate tires on the way. 2.5 minutes remaining. A little bit squirrely on throttle exiting La Source. But as he goes down the Support Series pit straight here and up through El Rouge and Radion, a little bit of slide on the back end, but I tell you what, he's taking that about as clean as you'd like. DRS activated would be there in the dry sessions. Not now. Well, I'm not too sure if we're going to have anybody actually be able to topple that time of Deathstorm, but potentially, do we get some new drivers on the front row? That's a big slide then from Brett Drives Fast. Surely he's going to hurt his time. Well, I think he's kind of got to back this one down. As Fuse Rogue, 153.013. That's half a second quicker than Deathstorm, by the way. Catmorg has just gone 5th. Improves by nearly 3 seconds there. Behind Brett Drives Fast by 1/10 of a second. Competitive 3rd through 5th. But if we start this race wet as well, it could very well be a bit of a crapshoot off the line and into that first corner. Just wondering, has Will been able to actually join the session here? I'll send him another invite just in case, because it doesn't appear that he's actually joined. So into the pit lane comes Fireball now. Looks as if he's done with his session here, potentially. I'm just going to try inviting Will one more time. I don't actually believe I have him added. DWCJ, Spider, Nicky64, Peak Hour, Mini, J-Dog, A-Dub, Race Day. I don't see him online anymore. Well, Peter DRH is retired to the pit lane. Final couple of seconds of the session here. Catmorg is going to be on his way into the pit lane. We've got Fuse Rogue next up around the line. Doesn't look as if he's improved. Only 3 other drivers out on track. Deathstorm, one of them, but he's just invalidated. In front of him, we've got J-Dog, who's gone off track, although 3 seconds quicker through Sector 1, I believe is what that said. J-Dog doing his damnedest now. We've got the McLaren of Brett Drives Fast potentially on a flyer as well. That doesn't appear off to a good one. 3 seconds quicker through Sector 2. Can J-Dog pull this one together and potentially get himself in towards the 4th row here? Either way, what we can confirm for you is that a Fuse Rogue on pole, Deathstorm 2nd, Brett Drives Fast 3rd. Oh, big slide from J-Dog. Well, that's going to be the end of his time to tempt, but he has held on to the car at least. Deathstorm 2nd, Brett Drives Fast will be 3rd. Unless he able to... Yeah, no, that's going to be it. Brett Drives Fast 3rd, Tin Man the Rowdy 4th, Catmorg 5th, Fireball 6th, Peter DRH 7th, 8th is Funky Breezy, 9th J-Dog, 10th is Flipbox, 11th is Moose, and rounding out the field, P12, somehow disqualified from the session, is that of Spaceman. But, as Deathstorm goes within 7 1/1000ths of a second of Fuse Row, we're going to have quite the competitive front row here, that much I do know. Well, in case you couldn't tell, it's raining pretty damn good right now here at Spa. I almost think this is approaching territory for full wet conditions. As we look in the garage of Spaceman there on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can see the intermediate tires chilling there in the garage. That tells me that's what the tires currently fitted to this team. a little bit of a slight quirk that this game has. It shows you that sort of thing. But goodness me, is it raining quite good. Just curious, because again, Peter said that the majority of this race is going to be having a good chance of rain. Definitely here at the start, obviously, as you can tell. As just the one light turning on for the formation lap, it does appear that we've only got intermediates on, which is good news. That tells me this track is at the very least drivable in these conditions. But what puzzles me and what I'm worried about is definitely going to be that first corner. We got 12 guys going barreling into that first corner off the start line. Of course, in the wet, they're going to be more careful, but where you have to be careful in the dry, you have to be 3 times as careful in the wet. And if you make even the most millimetric of mistakes here into that first corner, into La Source, not only are you going to feel the wrath of the carnage that's unfolded, but will everybody else either ahead of you or behind you. Fuse Rogue leads the grid around this circuit, the longest of circuits, I believe, on the Formula One calendar. Only, well, it's not bested by Las Vegas, but it is pretty damn close. But either way, one of the most revered, one of the most respected circuits in the world. The one synonymous with motor racing. You think of motor racing, you think of the Nürburgring, you think of Silverstone, you think of Indianapolis, you think of Bathurst, at least in my opinion, you think of Monza, and you think of Spa. And here we are at, once again, this cathedral of racing here. Fuse Rogue will lead them off the line. Deathstorm behind him. Again, reminder, 7 1/1000ths of a second was the gap between these two in the qualifying session. So, goodness me, do we have the potential for a pretty good race here? That's all there needs to be said about that. Brett drives fast. I'm thinking maybe will he try to make a move into this first corner here. He wasn't really close. I mean, he was about a second and a quarter behind the top 2 after it was said and done in qualifying, or somewhere around there. So I'm thinking maybe do we see these guys in the midfield try a little bit harder off the start. And these two guys maybe, going to be too focused on battling one another. Maybe they'll be taken by one of these guys on the next 2 rows of the grid. That would kind of be my guess as to what happens, although I have been known to be wrong from time to time. But what I will say this, it is absolutely chucking it down for the time being. I'm a little surprised we're only just on the intermediate tires. So Fuse Rogue, very unusual to this circuit. The top grid spot actually lines up on the inside line going into the first corner. Whether or not that's the preferred line, I think is really up to the driver. Usually, when you're on that first starting spot, you'll have the outside line into the corner. That's not the case here. The pair of the Ferraris can't find the grid box correctly, nor does Cap Morg. So, to the line goes Spaceman now. Final driver to be lined up here. Fuse Rogue, looking at him already pointed. Bit cockeyed toward the left side of the circuit. Here we go now. Lights about to be turning on here at Spa for the 3rd round of the season. 4 and eventually 5 lights. And in the rain, they are off. And it's going to be an absolutely snail's pace of a drag race off the line here. But Fuse Rogue will get a good start. He will already clear Deathstorm by the time they get to the first corner as they make their way in. It's actually Deathstorm still trying it around the outside. Brett drives fast and Tin Man the Rowdy trying their best there. Still side by side. It looks as if for the time being everybody's made it away okay out of the corner. Here goes Fireball. Look at the pace he's got on the outside. He'll get Funky Breezy. He may get Peter DRH. Oh, they're sideways and they're crashing. Have they hit anything? I'm not entirely sure that they have. They've gotten back on track. Somehow they've actually kept themselves in one piece. Considering the amount of contact there was, that one could have been nasty. But instead, all 12 cars remain on track as Fuse Rogue leads them into the first corner. Peter, DRH, and Funky Breezy battling it out now. Side by side, Funky Breezy apparently as is no longer in the session according to his ghosted car. But either way, 22 laps of this circuit yet to come here. Down the hill, in through Brussels for the first time. Moose has spun round towards the back. So is Spaceman as well. We've got front wing everywhere. 2, maybe 3 cars even losing some carbon fiber amongst the first stage of the lap. It doesn't appear that Spaceman's actually gone away all that bad. Moose has lost a fair amount of his front wing as J-Dog spins out of position there temporarily. Out of Puhan they go. Fuse Rogue leads by 0.4 of a second over Deathstorm. Brett Drives Fast was not able to make a move off the line, although what he was able to do, he was able to hold off the charging Ferrari in that fourth position of Tin Man the Rowdy. The top four have stayed the same so far. Peter, DRH, and Funky Breezy have both made up 2. Captain Morgan has actually picked up a spot there, gets him back to net -2 now, as he lost the 2 off the start. Making their way through Blanchemont now. Deathstorm not really in a position to try to overtake Fuse Rogue, I'm assuming, and hoping that once we get into some dry weather running towards the back end of this Grand Prix, that we may have a fair challenge for the race win. Of course, for the time being, it still looks that way, but we've already got a 1.5 between Brett Drives Fast and an additional 1.5 between Brett Drives Fast and Tin Man the Rowdy, and then 3.5 seconds between Tin Man and Peter. So Fuse Rogue, fastest lap of the session so far. Next up is Funky Breezy. He's not on track. Flipbox here, potentially. Does he have a look at Fireball? Coming through the corner. No, he's actually gone a little bit too far around there. Too much on the throttle, and he's lost position. Into the pit lane goes the Sauber of Moose. On the way in, Spaceman will make up the position over Flipbox as he tries to regain some composure here. As they make their way down the Kemmel Straight, it's 8.5, 9/10 of a second, and still now climbing. Fuse Rogue must have had a much better exit of Rouge and Radion, because for the time being, he is very much untested. For the time being, Funky Breezy still 6.5 of a second, 7/10 of a second, and I'm afraid now that is the closest battle we have on track, is the not human of Funky Breezy back to Peter DRH. We do still have about 8.5 of a second between Fuse Rogue and Deathstorm. Funky Breezy's now joined the session, thankfully. Thank you so much, Funky Breezy. Join your car and get in that race, because you're in a halfway decent position for the time being in trying to overtake Peter. 7/10 of a second between the top 2 as they make their way down through Puhan. I think the question is now who makes the mistake first as they go through Le Font. It appears that for the time being, Fuse Rogue is still handling this very well. But again, who will make that mistake first? You know what this race could really use is a safety car right about now. Not hoping for a DNF by anyone by any means, but goodness me, we need this grid to be closed back up, as we've had a couple of drivers decide to pit here recently. Has Funky Breezy rejoined his car? Yes, he has, so we pick it up with Funky Breezy here. 4/10 of a second. Old Peter nearly lost it going through Stabilo that time. 2.5 of a second now between them. Have I just been stung by a bee on my leg? It kind of felt like that for a second there. Anyways. 5/10 of a second. But actually 2 downshifts there going through Blanchemont then. For Funky Breezy, he's had to be very careful there, not up to grips with his car yet, perhaps. That's kind of what's going to happen when you spend time away from the car. Spaceman has lost it. He's into the gravel, exiting Stavilo. He's not hit anything. In previous games, if you had gone off track there, that car would no longer be in one piece. Up the hill through Rouge and Radion. Bit of a slide there for Deathstorm, but he's held it well. If he's able to get up to Fuse Rogue here, he may have a fair look, but I tell you what, Fuse Rogue is actually really putting pedal to the metal here. He's already put nearly a second and a quarter back to Deathstorm. Bit of a lock up there into Brussels for the time being. He still looks okay. Back on the throttle. Fireball, 8.5 of a second between himself and Captain Morgan here. As Flipbox picks up a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings. First one so far today. Eight-tenths of a second between Fireball and Captain Morgan. We've got Funky Breezy, 8.5 of a second back to Peter DRH for that 5th spot. Only now about to begin the 4th lap of this Grand Prix. Still a lot of racing left to go here, but this grid quite spread out already. Peter DRH nearly into the grapple there on the outside of Stabilo. No DRS, obviously, in the rain, nor would it be through this section of the track either, but Funky Breezy racing like he does have DRS at the time being. He's putting a lot of ground up to Peter DRH here. Into the chicane they go. Gonna have to be very careful in this braking zone, as well as on acceleration coming out of the corner. Very easy to make a mistake and spin that car around. Down the pit straight they go, heading into La Source. Peter DRH holding him off for the time being. Although, Funky Breezy, tell you what, looking much better here. Bit of a slide that time exiting campus, or, La Source. Up the hill through Arouge and Radion, who got the better way through the corner. I think Funky Breezy did only just outpace Peter DRH, and now starting to claw the gap back. But as I say that, Peter, I think using a bit of his energy store there, got that gap back upwards. Fireball potentially on Captain Morgan here. Or as we have a yellow flag going through La Source. I think Flipbox potentially. Something's happened with him. Through Malmedy now, down the hill into Brussels. The rain almost kind of appearing as if it's lightened up. It doesn't look as dense as it was at the beginning of the race. It is definitely still falling. But maybe, just maybe, can we see some dry weather running. I'm assuming that the longer that this takes as well, you know, the more time we spend in the wet here, the more racing at the back end of the Grand Prix we will have with the dry. That would be my guess. Funky Breezy now 0.3 of a second back to Peter DRH as they make their way into campus in Stavelot. Bit of a slide there for Peter. He's held it well, only just. Funky Breezy right up against the back end of the Sauber here. He's going to try the inside. Exiting Stavelot, going up through Blanchimont now. Difficult corner to go side by side with in the dry. Never mind in the wet. Look at this wheel-to-wheel racing. This is where it might get difficult, though. Bit of contact there. Peter's going to go off the track as he rejoins. I think Funky Breezy kind of doing the right thing there. They've both kind of decided that they wanted to give each other back the position. Funky's giving it to Peter. Peter was on the inside. I think Peter probably felt as if he maybe had gotten Funky Breezy off track then. Funky probably thought the same about Peter. Very respectful racing so far. Bit of a good battle going on here as we've got... Oh, I think Spaceman's just gone head into the barriers then. Yes, he has. He's missing quite a bit of his front wing. At least it kind of appeared that way. Well, he's not actually missing any. Did he just hit a styrofoam advertising board on the side of the track? Maybe that's what he's done. Because I saw some stuff go fly in there exiting Stavelot. As it turns out, nobody's hit anything. Down the Kemmel straight now. Might be turning into a three-car battle for position this as Peter DRH has held off Funky Breezy for the time being. That's allowing Captain Morgan trying to close in here. Fireball, another 1.5 seconds behind, but we might be getting into about a three-car battle here for this 5th spot. Towards the back of the grid as well, we do have Spaceman trying to hunt down Flipbox as well. Up the hill through Arouge and Radion. Moose has picked up a 3-second penalty for multiple warnings. Spaceman has to go over the curb then. Here we are now going through Puhan. Peter DRH is going to slide outwards. Funky Breezy, I think in the dry, would have absolutely had a look down to the inside there. Wasn't able to do it now in the treacherous conditions that we do face. Captain Morgan closing in. Fireball's actually falling slightly behind. It was about 1.7 as they've begun the Sector 2. Now it's 2 seconds. But a three-car battle now for this 5th position, headed by Peter DRH as they exit Stavelot. Oh, he's going to go into the gravel, Peter. To the inside goes Funky Breezy with no problems then. That may as well open the door for Captain Morgan. Going through Blanchimont now. 6th lap of the Grand Prix underway for our leaders. About to be underway for our midfield contenders for the time being. Exiting the chicane they go. Funky Breezy leads them down heading into La Source. Fireball's actually made up about 0.7 of a second. Into La Source they go. Captain Morgan 6.5 behind Peter DRH. Fireball is now within that 1 second barrier. Well, he was temporarily. So now about to be a 4-car battle here for the 5th spot. Up the hill through Arouge and Radion they go. Oh, Fireball, I thought it was going to get away from him there. It didn't. Great car control. Even in Division 3 here, we got some talent. That rain's still falling. 0.5 second between Captain Morgan and Peter DRH. As they make their way towards La Source now. Oh, Moose is retired. I think that's in the pit lane, thankfully enough. Yeah, appears to be at least. Back to the battle now for the 6th position. Funky Breezy has actually gotten round Peter DRH. That was with Peter's mistake. Exiting Stabilo last time by, but the Red Bull Funky Breezy, well, let me tell you something. Is he going to hold on to it? Yes, he does. That car got wildly out of shape exiting Brussels, and on the way into Speaker's Corner, he nearly had that car fully tilted round and into the barrier, but no, he's actually saved it. He's kept it on track. Although maybe now will that open the door for Peter, potentially Captain Morgan and Fireball as well. Over the grass a little bit there for Fireball. That rain definitely lightening up now. You can see the clouds starting to not necessarily clear, but they're getting more textured rather than just being one base gray color. 0.4 of a second, Captain Morgan. 3.5 of a second now. He's putting together some really good pace here for the time being. He saved up a lot of his battery as well as they make their way into La Source. Again, the only pit stop these drivers will need to make mandatorily is if it does go from wet to dry. Back on the throttle now. Peter, I tell you what, nearly got away from him there, getting back on the throttle. Really about into 4th or 5th gear then was that error for Peter. Car nearly got away from him. Peter's actually lost about 2 seconds now. Back to Funky Breezy. He's under a lot of pressure from the Aston Martin and the Ferrari behind. As we have a yellow flag exiting Stabilo. Flipbox has gone into the barriers. And he's lost a bit of the front wing as well. It appears that the track will stay green as it's off the racing surface. Down the Kemmel Straight they go. For the time being, Funky Breezy still leads this charge, but Peter DRH behind now has to fend off both Captain Morgan, the Aston Martin, as well as Fireball in the Ferrari. Just the one penalty so far for Flipbox. That was earlier on. Making their way down through Brussels. 7 laps complete. About to begin the 8th here in just a moment's time. 0.9 of a second Fireball. Obviously, as you can see, having to take that corner very carefully then. Just wondering when this race changes from wet to dry. Do we kind of begin to see, what tires do we go on? It's obviously going to depend. It's going to depend on how, when the crossover point is, but what I can tell you is this track might be ramping up now, as both Fuse Rogue and then Deathstorm behind him have now picked up consecutive fastest lap attempts. So maybe now do we start to see this track getting quicker, getting more dry. Of course, the rain's still falling, but it's in a position now you can at least see the dry line being formed on the circuit as these intermediate tires evacuating the water that they do. The surface still greasy, as you can tell. But I would like to believe that in just a couple of laps' time, we might be looking at some dry weather running. As coming up closer to halfway through this Grand Prix. Again, we're still having lap times in the minute 57s, whereas normally the faster lap's going to be in the 143s, late 142s. But if we keep seeing fastest laps being put down, we'll know the track is getting quicker. It's a second for Captain Morgan, back to Peter DRH. Fuse Rogue leads the battalion here as they make their way into Le Font, and eventually Campus and Stavilo after that. 3/10 here. I think Peter may have made a mistake there going through Lacombe, because Captain Morgan right up against the rear wing of the Sauber here. He's not going to try anything in through Brussels, not through Speaker's Corner either. His best shot is going through into Campus and Stavilo. That would be my guess. Unless, potentially does Peter DRH make a mistake and he has a look in an unorthodox position of the track. Could also be the case. Tell you what, Peter definitely struggling with that car. Brett drives fast. 3-second penalty for him. I believe that was going wide through Blanchemont that time. So Fuse Rogue, 156.380. Another fastest lap. Starting to get into the 156s now, so the track is getting better. It's not really in a position yet where you can go full-out racing now, but Captain Morgan to the inside of Peter DRH. Peter's made a mistake coming out of Stavilo that time as they make their way through Blanchemont now. It appears that Captain Morgan's going to get this one fairly. Nicely done for the Aston Martin. As Peter DRH, potentially another mistake then costs him positions. He's actually back down to 7th, in which he initially started this procedure. As Flipbox, I think, has gone off again. Yes, he has, this time through Brussels. And that car struggling here, as you can tell. Does Peter DRH have the means to get back to Captain Morgan here? I'm not entirely sure he does for the time being. What's interesting to me is that we have yet to see these cars run in the dry conditions. Once that dry happens, we may see some new front runners towards the top end of this grid. Because right now, none of these drivers know, or at least remember from their practice runs, what this track's going to be like in the wet. So J-Dog, a 3-second penalty now, that being for his 9th spot. Of course, 43 seconds behind Spaceman, 13 behind him, Flipbox 16 behind him. Very spread out grid this. Oh, we've got a yellow flag here coming out of Puhan. I think it's Funky Breezy. Yes, it is. That car has gone round. And he's fallen back to the 6th spot. What I will say is this. That rain has gotten very, very light now, and we may see some dry weather running here in just a little bit. We're about halfway through this Grand Prix now as we've begun the 11th lap here. Deathstorm has gotten that gap to Fuse Rogue down to about a 1.5 seconds. Still trying to claw his way back. As up the hill through Rouge and Ratty on this track, still not dry, obviously, as you can tell. Still very greasy, but we are not all that far away. I'm assuming we're probably going to get it by lap 14 at this rate. Just a couple of laps' time would be my guess. Something to look out for. At the point at which the game turns on DRS, where it says, it'll tell you, race control as DRS activated. That's essentially the game telling itself that the track is dry. So once you get that message, it's probably a good time to come on in for a dry compounded tires. For the time being, though, obviously, as you can tell, still the intermediates. The rain falling now, still only just. Again, I don't expect this rain to last very much longer. But what I do see is this. Fireball still within about 0.9 of a second on Peter DRH and trying to claw his way back to the Sauber now. We do have the top two within 1.5 seconds of each other, and slightly that gap closing just a little bit. 11 laps in, we can expect to see some of these intermediate runners maybe make pit stops soon. Oh, big slide for Deathstorm. He has caught the car. That was very close to being nasty then, but he's held on to it. Got a couple of cars a lap down here. J-Dog, Spaceman, and Flipbox, both the V-Carbs and the Red Bull. Fireball and Peter DRH 50 seconds behind. But, you know, obviously if you're in a position like this where you're at the back of the grid, could it hurt, you know, trying something new with the tire strategy? You know, being that first person out there with dry tires on, maybe that's what we'll see Fireball and Peter do. J-Dog's had a bit of a slide up through Eau Rouge that time. He's caught it. Still 9/10 of a second. We're halfway through this Belgian Grand Prix. Remember, next time out we head to the Algarve, or is it Algrave? I don't remember. Either one. It's Portimao, Portuguese Grand Prix, round number 4. On the eve of free practice 1 as well. For the real-life Belgian Grand Prix. As we got Funky Breezy within a second of Captain Morgan now. Peter DRH, I'm afraid, has gone wide going through Blanchimont. It's a 3-second penalty for him. Now the 4th driver of the day. To pick up time penalties. Fireball, 7.5 of a second, starting to close in on Peter here as well. A little surprised the rain is still falling. Only just a couple of drops a minute, but to the game that's going to register itself as rain, and the track will stay wet. 5.5 of a second now. Funky Breezy trying his best. He may have a fair look at Captain Morgan here going down into Lacombe. Fireball's going to pick up a 3-second penalty here. That must have been going up through Eau Rouge. 0.8 of a second, still trying their best now. Oh, a bit of a slide there for Funky Breezy. Does he hold on to it? Yes, he does. Only just. Now to Fireball. 0.7 of a second. Back to Peter DRH. That Ferrari getting much larger in the mirrors of the Sauber. Down the hill into Brussels. Peter DRH choosing to go a little bit wider. Fireball staying closer to the apex. You know, whatever's more comfortable for you in these conditions. In the dry, you know, there's really only 1 or 2, you know, lines around the corner. In these wet conditions, you do what's comfortable. And you do what's quick. And that's exactly what I think Fireball's trying to do here. He's just trying to, you know, keep this car in one place as we have Deathstorm into the pit lane. This may be our first pit for dry tires. Deathstorm, what does he choose to do? And it is the mediums going on here for the Alpine. That track still very greasy, very wet. That Alpine is going to have a hell of a time here trying to keep himself on the circuit. But what I can tell you is this: the rain has stopped falling here at Spa. We are not all that far away from some dry weather running. Deathstorm, we're going to go along with him just for a little bit here because again, he is the guinea pig for the rest of the grid. Up the hill through Eau Rouge and Radion. He's got to be extra careful here, and he is extra careful. Well, he's at the very least made the corner. That tells me it's possible. Down the pit straight they go. Funky Breezy, 5.5 of a second back to Captain Morgan in through La Source. Bit of a slide there on the back end, but he's not all that wet. Pour off. Five and a half tenths of a second, still trying to close in. We're going to start to see these lap times tumble here very shortly. Half a second now. Funky Breezy, can he find a way to get round Captain Morgan into Lacombe? He's not going to be close enough this time. We'll go back along with Deathstorm now. He is losing time back to Tin Man the Rowdy. That's something important to point out here, is that he is not gaining time to the Ferrari ahead or the McLaren. Or the Mercedes ahead of him for that matter. What I can tell you is this. This is putting him in a good position should the other drivers come in here shortly. J-Dog, 3-second penalty for multiple warnings, puts him up to 6. 0.3 of a second here between Funky Breezy and Captain Morgan as they look to go through Puhan now. We've got 10 laps to go. Bit of a slide there. Funky Breezy is going to try it to the inside. No, I don't think he's been afforded the space. He's going to try the outside now. Oh, he's had a look. Not going to happen, not now. So now we do see the leaders into the pit lane. Fuse Rogue in first for the mediums. Brett drives fast. Next in behind him, Tin Man the Rowdy has stayed out an additional lap here. Brett drives fast in. He's going, I believe, are those medium tires? They certainly look like medium tires. No, those are softs. Okay, so what Brett drives fast has done here, he's decided to go for the soft tires. Those are the grippiest compound, and while this track is still greasy, that will help him. Fuse Rogue really struggling, though, on the dry tires for the time being. Oh, Brett drives fast. Did you see that? Nearly clobbered the wall on pit exit. That was almost atrociously gross then. Up the hill through Eau Rouge and Radion, and now Jetstorm is slowly making up time to the cars ahead of him. Fuse Rogue on his soft tires, medium tires. But the question is, Tin Man the Rowdy is not necessarily yet losing time to the Mercedes behind. He's still 3 seconds ahead and is actually still gaining momentum here. Whether or not it keeps it going that way is the next question on my mind. But Brett drives fast with the McLaren, with the soft tires. Those, I will say, probably a good decision. He's got to take him a hell of a long ways away to get to the end of the Grand Prix here, but that's a good decision if you ask me by Brett, especially in the early days while the track is still greasy. As long as you can see the reflection of the screens there on the circuit, you can tell there is still a little bit of wetness. Tin Man the Rowdy is now put an additional 2 seconds back to Fuse Rogue. Fuse is really struggling with the Mercedes now. You can see he's spinning in 6th gear, exiting Puhan. I think now, though, is the opportunity for Tin Man the Rowdy to potentially pit here. 7.5 tenths of a second as Fuse Rogue loses the car. Deathstorm's going to take second place in what could eventually be the lead of the Grand Prix. Who is that? That's J-Dog. Something's happened with him. 7.5 seconds now for Deathstorm back to Tin Man the Rowdy. Does Tin Man choose to come in and pit now? Strike while the iron's hot. Get the dry compound tires on the car. No, he doesn't. He's going to stay out an additional lap here. That may very well be a mistake. Brett drives fast to the back end of Fuse Rogue. Oh, he's nearly gotten into the back of the Mercedes then. Mercedes of Fuse Rogue actually on his way in as he hits something. Is he coming in for a front wing change? As we've got J-Dog's actually picked up a tenner for speeding into the pit lane. It's going to be onto the soft tires. And a front wing change for Fuse Rogue. Ay. Tell you what, absolutely incredible stuff we're seeing here. Tin Man the Rowdy is going to have to come in this time. He's got 8 seconds back to Deathstorm. He's got 10 behind him to Brett drives fast. Fuse Rogue exiting the pit lane now is going to be quite a ways away from Brett drives fast as well. Those are medium tires going on for Captain Morgan. Deathstorm now a 3-second penalty for multiple warnings. And we're starting to see now, as we got a safety car on track. His flipbox into the wall. Well, he's lost the front wing. That's why we're seeing the safety car. I don't know where the front wing is. Can we go along potentially with Peter DRH? Oh, he must have done that on the track somewhere for a full safety car to have been brought out. And I don't see front... Oh, there it is. Yeah, well, that is on the racing line according to the game. Absolutely on the surface. Is it worth the safety car? Probably not, but what I can tell you is this. Tin Man the Rowdy might just have himself a free pit stop here. Everybody else would have pit, not long ago. I think Tin Man, should he exit the pit lane here, as Funky Breezy drive-through penalty for speeding under the safety car. Should Tin Man the Rowdy stay ahead of the grid here after this pit stop, that is going to be the most lucky turn of events that he would have had. Because, the times hadn't started to tumble down yet. He was still about 7.5 seconds ahead, but it was getting very close. Funky Breezy now a second, and now even, did that say now a third drive-through penalty? Tin Man in the pit lane. Deathstorm is going to follow suit. Brett drives fast. We can assume doing the same. Spaceman has picked up a 3-second penalty for multiple warnings under the safety car. Medium tires on for Tin Man the Rowdy. Deathstorm, can he potentially put on the soft tires now? That would be my guess. Yes, it is. Soft tires going on for the Alpine. It looks as if Brett drives fast could potentially pick up the second position here if he's able to get out of the pit lane before Deathstorm. They're going to be side by side on pit exit here. No, the Alpine will get it. And the Red Bull of Spaceman is actually going to separate those couple of drivers. And the safety car out on track will let it sort itself out. I'll step aside until then, but we're going to have one hell of a conclusion to this Grand Prix. Stay with us. So the safety car will be in at the end of this lap, and boy, do we have a finish coming up for you. Funky Breezy on a drive-through penalty. It looks like this. We've got ourselves a pretty even split here between soft and medium tire runners, 5 of which have chosen the mediums, the rest have chosen the softs. All but 3 drivers currently on time penalties, that being the leader, Tin Man the Rowdy, Fuse Rogue, and Captain Morgan. Funky Breezy, again, the drive-through penalty. When we restart this Grand Prix, we're going to have 5 laps to go, 4 of which will feature DRS. Tin Man the Rowdy in a fantastic position now to win this Grand Prix. Whether or not he does that is going to be completely up to him and the speed and pace of the couple of drivers behind him. Deathstorm off of a win last time out in Hungary. Does he have the ability to do the double if he can get around Tin Man the Rowdy and then put 3 seconds behind to him? We are green flag for the first time in the dry today. Tin Man the Rowdy leads him into the first corner, already struggling potentially with the car, as this will be the first taste of dry running that they've had all day long, as we have a yellow flag. It's J-Dog who's gone off there going through La Source. As they go up through Rouge and Radion now, Deathstorm's going to have a fair look at Tin Man the Rowdy here, going down the Camel Straight. Brett drives fast, looking on, and hoping that a mistake can be made. Fuse Rogue also trying to poke his head in on this battle as well. Flipbox, an additional 3-second penalty for multiple warnings, puts him up to 9. Deathstorm now trying the left side through Malmedy. No. Will he try the switchback and go down the inside into Brussels? This will be one hell of a move if he's able to pull it off. Oh, but he's going to be held at bay for the time being by the Ferrari into the corner. Brett drives fast, has gone way too deep. It's going to allow Fuse Rogue open the door. There you go. Steal the objects from my house. Oh, but off the track goes Fuse Rogue. Thankfully, it doesn't appear that he's hit anything other than that if Brett drives fast. As now, we got a yellow... Funky Breezy overtaking Fuse Rogue. I thought we had a yellow flag there for a moment. There's so much going on already. 10th and a half between Tin Man the Rowdy and Deathstorm. As they make their way into campus in Stavilo. Remember, next time by will be 4 laps to go, and which will feature DRS as well. The question is, Tin Man the Rowdy is almost certainly going to be overtaken by Deathstorm here, but can he stay within DRS range? Because if he does that, he's got a fair shot at straight up winning this Grand Prix. If he doesn't, Deathstorm, I think, has the pace to put the 3 seconds past him. He's got 4 laps to do so. When does he begin doing that? Does it start now, into the final chicane? No, it's not going to happen quite yet unless one hell of a switchback is performed. Deathstorm's going to try around the outside. On the way out of the corner, does he have better acceleration? Yes, he does! And Deathstorm takes the lead of the Grand Prix, albeit just for the time being. Still some penalties to be had. Brett drives fast. Fireball, 3-second penalty for multiple warnings. Brett drives fast on 6 seconds himself. We got a yellow flag going through the chicane. It appears that maybe the pair of the V-Carb, something has happened with them. Up the hill through Rouge and Radion now. Brett drives fast, peeking his head at the back end of this battle here, hoping that he can perhaps play some sort of a part. Tin Man the Rowdy will have DRS. He's already closing in on Deathstorm here. Where is he going to try? Is he going to try the inside to the outside? Deathstorm is actually going to pull into the middle and block off both lines, but Brett drives fast, leaves, has the ability to the inside, and now gets a 10-second penalty for corner cutting. Sorry, let me try to break that down for you one more time. Deathstorm took the middle of the circuit, didn't allow Tin Man to go around the left side, didn't really allow him to go around the right side either, but he's left the door wide open for Brett drives fast, who, in fairness to him, wanted that move, tried to take it, has gone off track, cut the corner, and picked up a tenner for his troubles. So once again now, the battle really still down to Deathstorm and Tin Man the Rowdy, but we have a problem brewing here for Tin Man the Rowdy. He's 8.5 tenths of a second behind, and that time is climbing. If he falls outside of DRS range, it could very well be all over for Tin Man. Not to mention Captain Morgan in on this as well, assuming that Tin Man does stay within a 3 seconds of Deathstorm. We could be looking at a 2-way battle for the win here, but potentially even 3 if Fuse Rogue can join the fray. But as they go through Blanchemont now, Tin Man the Rowdy behind by a second. Captain Morgan trying to poke his head on this battle as well. Really, all he can do is run to the end of his chain and bark for the time being. But potentially, with now DRS activated as Peter DRH a 3-second penalty for multiple warnings, Tin Man was able to stay within a second at the detection point prior to the chicane, exiting Blanchemont. Going down through La Source now, look at this. Brett drives fast, defending the left-hand side, but Deathstorm goes down to the inside and takes the position. And so now Deathstorm, looking like now potentially, could he take the outright win of this Grand Prix? I think he's going to have DRS as well. Was he behind? No, he wasn't behind. Brett drives fast. Brett does have DRS. He doesn't use it. Tin Man the Rowdy closing in as fast as he can. 0.7 of a second behind Deathstorm. Again, that's the delta that really matters here. Not to mention Captain Morgan in on this as well. We will have 2 laps to go at the line next time by. Brett drives fast, 7.5 of a second. Tin Man the Rowdy is 1.5 seconds to the good for the time being, but that's not really a lot considering you're not really going to have DRS to anybody important here. Brett drives fast, obviously. Next up, he will have DRS back to Brett, but that's not really relevant in the grand scheme of things considering Brett is now losing time even to Deathstorm. That's almost a second between the Alpine and the McLaren now, not to mention the Ferrari losing time, now almost eclipsing 2 seconds. This is not looking very good for Tin Man here. He's got to stay at least somewhat close to Brett drives fast. I think once maybe DRS comes into play, next time going down the pit straight and then exiting Al Rouge and Radion, can Tin Man really stay within this battle? But they'll have 2 laps to go at the line this time. Deathstorm looking for his back-to-back victory after last time out taking it at the Hungaroring. Will he able to do it here? It's going to be a tough one considering the gaps at hand. Meanwhile, Captain Morgan 0.2 of a second away from Tin Man the Rowdy. Remember, if they can stay within the 3-second margin, this is the battle for the lead right here. Deathstorm, fastest lap of the session. It's 2 seconds between Tin Man and Deathstorm with 2 laps to go heading into La Source. Down to the inside, DRS will be activated for all 4 of these cars. Fuse Rogue into the battle as well. Deathstorm trying to prance away into the distance now, but as long as these cars behind him have DRS, it's not really going to matter. Fuse Rogue has surely picked up a warning for that, but for the time being, nothing wrong. Tin Man the Rowdy with DRS, he'll get around Brett drives fast with almost no error then. To the inside now as well, Captain Morgan into Lacombe. Fuse Rogue has tried the right side as well. Brett drives fast, tries to shut the door as much as he can. Into the gravel goes Fuse Rogue as much as he can to the inside. Well, he's actually made that move happen, although I fear was that off track. It kind of looked like it could have been. For the time being, it's 0.6 of a second between Tin Man the Rowdy and Deathstorm. Tin Man was almost better off staying behind Brett drives fast, because at least he was going to be able to have DRS to get himself into a good position. With 1.5 laps remaining now, he's only got 0.5 of a second. And by the way, when we see the 5 laps that Deathstorm has spent on those soft tires, the majority of those have been under safety car. So really, those softs are about as fresh as they can get now, and it's 0.2 of a second between Deathstorm and potentially going back-to-back here. But again, is Captain Morgan potentially faster than that of Tin Man the Rowdy? Again, being that we're in the dry tires, the dry conditions, this is unknown territory for the majority, pretty much all but 3 laps of the race so far. Coming to the chicane for the penultimate time now, about to start the final lap of the Grand Prix is Deathstorm. He's got to have this lap absolutely brilliant. He's just set the fastest lap. He's about 5/100ths away from keeping the win for the time being. But Tin Man and Captain Morgan, when you have good pressure like this, it drives cars to go faster, and it takes drivers to push the limit, to stay within potential. But let's see now as Peter DRH has left the session for whatever reason. Tin Man the Rowdy, about 1/10 of a second to the good right now, but it's not going to hold on, especially considering Deathstorm using every last ounce of his energy store that he can. DRS activated for Captain Morgan down to the inside. That could very well be the win of the Grand Prix if Captain Morgan can stay within the 3-second window. Tin Man the Rowdy did everything he could, but I don't believe he's going to be able to hold on here, unless does he have an opportunity on Captain Morgan making a mistake. Either way, Captain Morgan is actually getting closer to Deathstorm here. The question is now, does Captain Morgan have the ability to pull off a very clean lap this? Does Deathstorm make a mistake? Does he go even faster and put more time to the challengers behind him? That could very well be the case. Into Le Fong for the final time. Campus and Stavelo, Blanchimont in the final chicane after. 0.5 second still, Captain Morgan. Can he potentially find his first win of the season? The very early days of this season as well. For the time being, it appears that Deathstorm will only lose the position to Captain Morgan as Tin Man the Rowdy outside of 3 seconds for the time being. Fuse Rogue has spun it coming out of Stavelo. Deathstorm making his way through Blanchimont now, it has to be said. Not really looking as if he's going to be able to hold on to this one. But look at this. Tin Man the Rowdy, does he have a final opportunity into the chicane? He's going to really have to send it. Oh, but I don't think he will. Unless, does Captain Morgan make a mistake? Oh, it's the bump and run. Oh, and Tin Man the Rowdy's going to cross the line second, but you absolutely know that that one's not going to stay. Captain Morgan's going to get third back, and Tin Man the Rowdy is almost certainly going to be penalized for that. I don't believe it's his fault. Final lap of the race, final couple of corners. When you're in position to win on a penalty like that, you got to try your best. But seeing as how that's the case, Deathstorm is actually going to walk away the winner of this Grand Prix. Well, join us in Portugal next week for more entertainment. That was fun. 11 cars on the grid for the majority of this Grand Prix, and we just had a fantastic showing here. Deathstorm taking the win back-to-back. Tin Man the Rowdy, I'm almost certain, is going to be being demoted down to third. But for Hotspot, it's been a pleasure joining you once again here in Division 3 for the first time this season. We'll see you next time, hopefully. Fantastic racing today.